Greeting from Grapevine, Texas. This is Mitch from 30 West IP, and this is the November 2019 Hot Topic webcast. This webcast was recorded on 5 November 2019. Things may have changed. During this update, we're going to discuss electronic plotting with Don from PlotNG. Don's the author of the program, and he's going to walk us through the system, the design, and the capabilities. Ed's also with us, and he's the 30 West IP subject matter on electronic plotting. Dennis with the FAA has joined us, and he's a subject matter expert as well. Don and I asked Dennis to join us so that he can offer any comments or observations that he might have, and we want to thank him for taking the time to be here. So I want to introduce Don. So Don, if you want to say a few words.
Sure. Hi, Mitch. So my name is Don Argentar. I am the founder and CEO of PlotNG, which is just a fancy way, as Mitch said. I authored the software. So hopefully today we'll have an opportunity to talk about electronic plotting and how we view the solution to this problem. And I think it's going to be a kind of exciting conversation to have because we're taking major leaps forward in simplifying the entire process and increasing the situational awareness that you have as pilots while you're executing a flight. And more to the point, it's a fully compliant solution. So there's a legal basis for this too that we're going to touch on, and we're going to be working with a number of different groups in the future to make this the best possible solution that you can hope to achieve.
Okay, let's let Dennis. Dennis, would you introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you very much, Mitch. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we got you great.
All right, terrific. Yeah, I'm Dennis Mills. I'm what the FAA calls a SAO specialist, folks that go around and ensure that our oceanic procedures are being followed and being demonstrated, and particularly in some sorts of validations. I am been extremely interested in electronic plotting for quite some time. And when Mitch invited me to attend this, I snapped it up right away. I'm only here really basically to see what is being presented, and if I see any obvious glitches, obviously I'll let you know. But we haven't, as an FAA group, yet got our hands around policy and our procedures. We know what works for paper plotting, and if you add an element to the paper plotting that works, that's just well and fine. But the basics are what we'll be looking for, and I do think that technology needs to catch up. Although I am a grandfather of the paper plot, if as long as you're putting your pencil right in the middle of that line that you drew your course on, everything should be working just fine. So I'm very interested in seeing what's being presented. Probably won't hear a lot of comments from me, but let's get on with it. How's that?
Excellent, excellent. Thank you, Dennis. We also are preparing for our next webcast. That'll be on December 9th, and we're going to come back to electronic plotting. We're going to have a guest speaker from AirRank Direct demonstrating their plotting system and its capabilities. And now I'm going to hand it over to Don and let Don walk us through the system.
Okay. So as I originally said, we have a new software product called PlotNG, stands for Next Generation Electronic Plotting. And we're aiming to solve one problem and one problem only, which is how to do an electronic version of the paper plot. I'd like to thank Mitch, Ed, and all the terrific people at 30 West IP for hosting this webinar. It's a wonderful opportunity to communicate with this cohort of community of pilots. It's a wonderful way of sharing the ideas. And I'm hoping that you'll have some questions at the end that we can address and possibly get you to think about electronic plotting as the future of oceanic aviation. So the first thing that I would like to do is talk a little bit about the philosophy of how and why PlotNG came into being. This is actually a piece of software that was designed from the ground up to solve electronic paperless plotting. It wasn't an add-on to another type of application. I know that a number of pilots use some of the old standards, such as ARINC Direct Software or JEPFD, we actually decided to take a different tack on this. And rather than develop a separate app, we decided to leverage a platform that everybody uses, or at least the vast majority of pilots use, which is ForeFlight. Now, ForeFlight has excellent tools, like any other piece of software. Sometimes it may meet your needs, sometimes it may not. But by and large, it has emerged to be a very, very powerful platform, and it has a lot of powerful features. And our thinking was, why not add a capability to it, which will allow you to use a system that you already know and love? That's something that would reduce your training time considerably and give you a comfort of knowing how the system already works. We also thought it was important not to have you required to install an app on your iPad device or your iPhone device. And for that amount, also update any database subscriptions. We know that sometimes it's difficult to keep all that stuff synchronized. And one of the most important elements of what we're doing, which is the independent root validation, does require ARINC 28-day cycle data. And we did not want to have an opportunity for somebody to forget to update their data and possibly get incorrect results. So we decided to put the software as a service on the internet. It's web-based. We'll talk more about that later. And make it real super simple. You have nothing to manage. You just have to send your flight plans in. We process it, you get the result back, and you're off and running. We also wanted to make sure that the software would be compatible with IT-approved tools. And this is a rather complicated conversation because not everybody has the same kind of IT department requirements, but it's not uncommon for iPad devices to be locked down by security software or restrictions placed on the kind of email service or internet services that you're allowed to use, or where and how you store your documents. So we wanted to make extra special effort to make sure that when you use our service, we'll work with all of those things that are in place without having to require you to go to your IT department and get special permission, because we're using minimal services. We also thought it was extremely important that you have a lightning fast learning curve. I think pilots know that when you go in for a recurrent every 6 months, there's always something new to learn and study. We didn't want this to be a barrier to using the software. So by using ForeFlight as the platform, if you already know that software, this is just an extension of it. It's just learning 1 or 2 new skills that may take 5, possibly 10 minutes, and you're up and running. We also wanted to be internationally compliant. And that's a kind of loaded remark because, as I'm sure everyone knows, the rules from all the various ICAO member states do vary slightly, but we decided to take a look at all of the rules and then pair out just the common ones that make sense, that accomplish the task and won't get you into any trouble. Most importantly, from a human factors point of view, we absolutely insisted that there be 0 data entry, that you are required to type anything in. We know that when you're stressed an hour or 2 before the flight, busy with many other tasks, the last thing you want to be doing is typing in information that may be incorrect, or you may make a calculation error that's a problem. We wanted to eliminate all that stuff. So our software is 0 manual data entry, and we'll see many examples of how that plays out. The other end of the spectrum is once you use the software and you actually get from point A to point B, you're required to hold on to your data for a minimum of 6 months. And that's colloquially called document management. Some flight departments do something as simple as take your paper, stick it in a folder, put it in a file cabinet, and just lock it down. Some people actually use electronic solutions, but if for every company that's out there that does document management in some form or fashion, there's twice as many solutions as to how this is done. And one of the things that we thought was very important is that we have what we'll call as open an architecture as possible in using our software so that you can use whatever procedures and processes you have in place that you've been using forever. We're not here to tell you or dictate to you how you should be doing it. We're providing you with tools to allow you to do it any way that you see fit. And what this is all a fancy way of saying is that we want to eliminate the calculation errors. We want to eliminate the data entry errors. We want to eliminate GNEs if possible. And we're saving you an enormous amount of time in doing this. So I want to talk about those last 2 for a moment. The GNEs, or the gross navigation errors, most pilots think about you're actually en route and you fly off course. Turns out there's another class of GNEs that can occur during the pre-flight process. We have seen a number of examples from a number of different flight planning companies or providers where the data that they have sent to their customers may be slightly incorrect, or it may not have current track information, or it may send you through multiple tracks, or it may be that the flight plan filed with the appropriate agency, that is the ICAO portion, does not actually agree with the textual stuff that you would be reading. These are GNE errors that could be caught before you leave for your flight. PlotNG has, on a number of occasions, successfully trapped these events and raised red flags, and the pilots then followed up with their providers to resolve what the issue was. So there's a lot of benefit to doing a proper pre-flight planning using this kind of a software. The time saver element is quite staggering. We know that it can take pilots anywhere from 20 to 45 minutes, depending on the complexity of the trip, to plot everything on a chart, including the ETPs, the course lines, where the airports are, all the information that's required, and it's easy to make a mistake. PlotNG typically will take less than a minute. After you email your flight plan to us, we'll get it back to you with all the data that you need to load into ForeFlight and automate the entire process. And because it is so efficient, it allows you to run this application minutes before a flight to get the absolute latest possible data from any of the world agencies. So I'm going to talk a little bit about a legal basis, and we're not going to get into the hardcore regulations or international standards, but what I will say is that there are two fundamental areas that we're looking at. One is in the US, and for that reason, we'll talk about Advisory Circular 9170B. 8900.1 is the standard. An advisory circular is just that, but it does give extremely good information and guidance as to how to think about the problem. And of course, ICAO has their own rules. For paper plotting, the column on the left, these 8 things, are common to all of the member state requirements. You have to plot your route, your waypoints, the ETPs, alternate airports, contingencies, current track messages, 10-minute checks, and also have an independent route validation. That's the common thread. What PlotNG does is we provide all of that, and we also address these 4 other areas. So we have 2 different solutions for rerouting, which we'll see in graphic detail shortly. And the reroute option is dependent on whether or not you have Wi-Fi or if you don't have Wi-Fi in your airplane. So we're trying to address the needs of most operators. We also do some advanced detection of the information that's in your flight plans, so that if there are any crossing restrictions at any of the fixes, we're going to take that information and feed it into ForeFlight so you can get the absolute best possible user experience and situational awareness from the tool. We've had a number of customers discuss with us the idea of putting slop routes, that is the offset up to 2 nautical miles and tenths, off of a track. And we've been back and forth on this. We're still taking information from the field to see if we want to add that kind of capability. I think it's important to say that slop really is not a paper plotting requirement. We understand why people are asking us about it. I will just digress and say that with ForeFlight, by using the data fields on the bottom of your screen, you can select one of those fields to give you the cross-track error. And that's a poor man's version of knowing that you have a second source to see that you're actually off track. I think that's all I want to say about that now, but I will leave it as a discussion point that if after the seminar or webinar you'd like to contact us and discuss this, we're more than happy to talk with you about it. And of course, the last part is we are working currently towards working with a flight department to get a 135 approval. And once we get that, it'll be open to all of the charter and airline operations as well. Very easy to add to your LOAs. So the first thing I want to do before we actually show you the front end product, the stuff that you'll see on the iPad, I want to talk a little bit about the back end. So PlotNG, as I said, is an internet-based service, and you access it using your web browser and an email client. 2 simple tools that everybody knows how to use that has any knowledge of the internet. There are 5 screens that we provide in the back end. We have an account screen, which allows you to put information about who your company is and what method of payment. Trip kit screen, which allows you to just record all the trips that you've taken, so you can see what you've done and what PlotNG is doing for you. There's a settings screen which allows you to customize some of the options of things that you can set in terms of what PlotNG will produce as output. But the two screens that I want to talk to you about today and show you on the screen, the first one is the aircraft screen, the second one is the pilot screen. The way it's set up now, PlotNG allows you to have an unlimited number of aircraft and an unlimited number of pilots for each account. The reason why we have to trap the aircraft is because we're very, very careful about the security. We understand that we don't want to have flight departments providing data that has secure information and then possibly getting charged for the wrong thing or the data falling into the wrong hands. So when we look at your flight plan, we will in fact take a look at the aircraft registration number and compare it against what you have in your account. If the two do not match up, we will not run that flight plan and no information will be produced. You'll notice at the top of the screen, there I have, for example, my company name, PlotNG, but in your registration form, you would set your company name up, and then when any of the flight department members log on, they can see at a glance they've got the right account. Top right corner is the account manager, and the name of the account manager is hyperlinked, so if you want to send them an email, that's a quick way to do it. But the most important part of this is to enter your aircraft registration number, and then click the blue button to add the aircraft. That's the entire thing. If you can just enter the number and hit the blue button, you have now registered an aircraft with PlotNG. Of course, sometimes you may not have use for that aircraft to be internationally compliant. So in that case, you can remove it from the list and just hit the delete button. Again, the aircraft registration number is used to validate your flight plan to make sure that we are doing the correct thing for you at the correct time. We also have another screen, which is the pilot screen. And just like we need to know who which aircraft you're using, we also need to know who is using it and who's authorized to use it. So in this case, you would enter your full name and your email address and hit the blue button to add the pilot. That's the entire thing. But we do provide a few other features. One, of course, is occasionally, sometimes a password needs to be reset. So the account manager can go on, click the reset password next to the pilot's name, and an email will go out to them, allowing them to reset their password to any password of their choosing. Of course, it's possible that you may have a spelling error or somebody changes an email address. If that's the case, you can simply update that pilot's information. You can also switch that pilot to become the new account manager. It's not uncommon where sometimes an account manager for a piece of software may want to switch roles with somebody else. We make it very easy to do that so you can manage your own flight department. And then of course, if a pilot's not working with the flight department, you can easily remove him. If you understand these concepts, this is as complicated as it gets to manage PlotNG. We worked very, very hard to make this as simple and as quick as possible to administer. The pilot is also used to authorize it. So if PlotNG receives an email from an email address that's not registered in the system, that flight plan will be rejected. So we're looking at several things. A, we're looking at the aircraft tail number. B, we're looking at the pilot email address. And C, we're looking to make sure that you have a valid payment method. If all those three things come together, you're good to go. You'll get your trip kit back in under a minute. So let's talk about that process. What actually is involved in making this work? Well, the first thing you have to do is work with your provider to get a flight plan. And we have a number of providers that we currently understand what they're producing. I have a list at the end, which I'll present to the group. But once you receive that PDF in the email, you simply forward that email. Just hit the forward on your email application and send it over to PlotNG. PlotNG receives it, processes your result, and then immediately sends you back the information that you then import right into ForeFlight. It's really that simple. Nothing more to it. There's nothing to type in. There's no configuration. When you're in the field, after the backend is set up, it's just forward an email and then hit a couple of buttons to load it into ForeFlight. And you can see on the screen a full display of a lot of the features that PlotNG provides. And we're going to talk about that now and show you what they look like. So this is an example of what you would get back in an email. And this is actually an email that would be viewable on an iPad. The top section of it shows you what the route summary is. So it shows you the recall number, the registration number, where you're going from and to, etc. And then a little bit further down, we have a blue button. Pardon me. The blue button, if you tap that in your email, will load that route right into ForeFlight. That's all you have to do. There's no cutting and pasting. There's no typing. There's no nothing. We want to eliminate the human element out of this because anytime you type something in, that's where a mistake can occur. The third thing is, at the bottom of the email, we have 3 attachments to it. The first attachment on the left is called the trip kit. And in ForeFlight parlance, that's what they call a content pack. And this is extra information that we can build into ForeFlight for the purposes of that flight. The second attachment is a validation PDF, which is your route validation. And this allows you to have a copy in the email that you can look at immediately without having to involve ForeFlight. So you can take a look at the master document. You can look at any other documentation that you have and just see if we're looking at the same thing. And then, of course, the third one is the actual flight plan that you sent. You're getting it back so that everything is put together in one place and organized neatly. If you happen to be working at your desk or you're at an FBO and you're working on a full computer with a full screen and a mouse and what have you, you may not want to do the email to send your trip kit in, rather your flight plan. What you may want to do is just do a drag and drop. And we provide drag and drop capability on the back end by logging in to the website. You can then drag your flight plan right onto the web browser, and that's another way of getting your flight plan into PlotNG. But by and large, the easiest, simplest, preferred method is simply to email it. Once you hit that blue button, your route gets loaded into ForeFlight. ForeFlight then, depending on whether you have a standard instrument departure as part of that flight plan, will pop up a dialog box asking you which runway to select. And then, if you'll notice at the top of your screen, this is one of the things that PlotNG does, which is it looks very closely at your flight plan and it picks out potential crossing restrictions that you may have. Notice that the Dogal fix has a crossing restriction of 474 knots at flight level 450. So we put this in here and it will be annotated on your ForeFlight screen, which gives you an enhanced capability to get better situational awareness just by using ForeFlight. So let's talk about ETPs. This is everybody's favorite topic, and it's one of the more important things that are involved in the paper plotting solution. We're giving you an equivalent of it. What I'm showing you here is an excerpt of a route, which has 3 groups of 3 ETPs. They're all color-coded, and they're color-coded using red is medical, blue is depressurization, green is one-engine INOP, and black would be PNRs. And if you were to pinch zoom on the screen, you can see on the top image, there's a couple of tiny little arrows coming out of the triangle icons. When we pinch zoom, they blow up to full size. So this is the same exact representation of what you would have drawn on the paper if you did it by hand. We just do it for you automatically. And because we have pinch zoom capability, which you don't have on paper, there's a lot of things operationally that you get to see that may take a little adjusting in the way that you think about interacting with it. You'll notice that part of the route overlays a track, and we'll talk more about the tracks momentarily. If you tap on one of the ETP triangle icons, you'll get a pop-up on ForeFlight. And you'll notice at the top of the pop-up, it confirms that you're looking at the medical ETP. Previous airport was BIKF, forward airport is CYQX, and at the bottom, we have all of the pertinent information that comes from your provider's calculations that tell you what the magnetic course is, the flight level, distance, time, and fuel required to get to that airport. So just on a single tap, you've got all the information you need for any one of the ETPs at any time. The next thing, of course, related to ETPs is the alternates. And we do something a little out of the box here. Instead of using a standard airport symbol, we draw a large ring around the airport, and that ring is color-coded, and it matches the colors of the ETPs, where again, red is medical, blue is depress, green is one-engine INOP, and black is PNR. So those circles can contain anywhere from 1 to 4 colors, depending on what that airport is used for. So, for example, this was just a PNR airport, it would just be black. Or if it was medical and depressurization, but no one-engine INOP and no PNR, then it would just be blue and red. taking up half the circle for each of those two colors. In this way, your situational awareness is greatly enhanced, and when I show you a blow up a little bit later of what a full route looks like, you'll be able to pick out where the alternate airports are at a glance and what function they serve, greatly improving your situational awareness. Not unlike if you look at an approach chart and you're looking for the initial approach fixes, this is another way of using that as an analogy to see how we group the data. But in addition to the ETPs, the contingencies is a very, very important consideration. And that is, what do you do if you have one of these contingencies and you have to react to it? Well, we understand that it's sometimes difficult to remember all of this information. So what PlotNG does is strategically put a yellow bullseye on the plot, which is near the ETPs, but away from them so it doesn't interfere with the rest of the information. And if you tap that bullseye, you'll get a pop-up. And at the bottom, you can select, in this case, the North Atlantic Operations PDF. And popping that up will give you the latest NAT bulletin. All of the pages, you can scroll through it, and it's all built into your for-flight session. You don't have to go looking for it in documents. You don't have to search for any text. It's right here at the tap of a button. One of the other things to note, however, is that it's very common to think about NAT contingencies in the North Atlantic, but there are contingencies that do occur in other FIR regions. And for that reason, PlotNG understands if that route segment and group of ETPs is in the North Atlantic, any one of the FIRs that are associated with it, in which case you get a NAT contingency icon. But if you're out of those FIRs, then you'll just get a regular contingency icon. And in that case, we display the document that's published on James Albright's Code 7700 site. It's an excellent document. It's a great starting point. And we also have the ability to customize it if your flight operations require something special. So let's talk about tracks. Tracks are probably one of the simplest things and also one of the most complicated things. What I'm showing you here is the icon and label that we use in PlotNG, and it's a very carefully constructed symbol so that when you look at it on the screen, you pretty much have all the information you need and can drill down momentarily later. So the first thing is you'll notice that we always display the TMI number as part of the track label, so you can identify quickly which TMI you're dealing with. Second thing is the track ID, which is next to it, but then we have two other symbols. If the track is preceded with an asterisk, there are going to be performance-based communication and surveillance flight levels, typically between flight level 350 and 390. That track contains PBCS flight levels. And if there's a plus at the end, that tells you that the track occurs in the future. We provide tracks with every single flight plan that you file that include the North Atlantic, Australia, the Pacific, and Southeast Asia. It's all the worldwide tracks, and you can scroll around the screen and move around and see where the tracks are. They may not be applicable to your flight, but we're giving you a complete solution worldwide. It's also important to know that in our solution, tracks are static, which means that when you run PlotNG and you generate your flight plan, you will get the current tracks at the moment that the flight plan was run. And those tracks will stay with your trip kit forever. So when you archive this, those track messages will be the same. If you pull it up in the future and want to display it again, you'll see the tracks as they were when you actually ran PlotNG, not what the current tracks look like. So it's very easy to justify what you did and how you did it from a documentation point of view. Notice here that I'm showing a number of different tracks. We have tracks with the PBCS flight levels, and we enhance them. So if you look at the middle three tracks, they're a darker green. The top and bottom tracks are a lighter green. We do the same thing for the current tracks, which are always in purple. You'll have an enhanced purple color if you have PBCS flight levels, and a muted color if it turns out that there are no PBCS flight levels. But that's not all. If you tap on any of the track icons, you'll get a pop-up. We show you the TMI, we tell you which track it is, we tell you the valid date and time, and then we show you all the flight levels inclusive, including no layers, and we also have an indicator as to whether or not it's a PBCS layer. So at just the tap of a button, you have everything you need to know about the current track. We also provide 10-minute check solution. So what this does is you can activate a layer, and we'll see a little bit later how the layers work. We will calculate the exact location of where 10-minute checks should be placed after each one of the route fixes. And they're calculated based on your flight plan cruise speed that you put in or that your provider has put into the flight plan. So if you were to go into ForeFlight and take out the measuring tool, you'll see it comes out basically to 10 minutes. But we also know that some operators are allowed to operate with a 5-minute check. And in that case, that's one of the options in the settings page on ForeFlight, which on a pilot per pilot basis, you can say, I want to have 5-minute checks as opposed to 10-minute checks. These are, if you will, egg timers. They don't do anything other than if you happen to have your aircraft symbol moving across the map when the airplane's on top of the 10-minute check, that should be your reminder, do the check now. And the airplane symbol is just smaller than the actual icon, so it all fits in quite nicely. Here's a blow up of one of the 10-minute checks. And the question is how do you actually do it? Well, this is the electronic version of what you do on paper. Very simply, you go to your FMS, you take a look at your lat long position, and you plot it literally on the ForeFlight screen because you can now annotate your maps. Place an X exactly where that should, where the FMS says you are, and then write down the time. You're done. All you have to do is take a screenshot and you've documented what you need for paperless plotting. And you'll have an accumulation of maybe 5, 10, 15 different screenshots at the end of the flight. When we get to the end of this, I'll show you what you can do with those. So I have a little video demo here, which shows you how you actually do the markup. Let's get this thing started. And what we're doing here is we're putting an X right on the screen. You can see it over the left 10-minute check. Then what I'm doing is I'm choosing an iOS shortcut, which you may or may not be familiar with. And this shortcut just creates a screenshot for you. It allows you to quickly go to your camera, take a picture of your FMS. It saves the FMS picture, and it saves the screen that you're seeing in ForeFlight. And we did this all from using the Send To icon in the lower right-hand corner of your flight plan at the top of the screen. You can, however, do all of this manually. There's more than one way to skin the cat, and this is but an example of how we open up the architecture so you can take advantage of iOS in any way that works best for you. Notice that in the lower right-hand corner, the data field is the Zulu time. And while this will definitely work for Part 91 operators, we're having a discussion to figure out if it is also good for 135 and 121 operators. By taking the screenshot with just the X and having the time down there, it could very well be an equivalent solution, saving you the step of having to write the time next to the X on the course. So this is where we get to the route validation. And this is actually one of the more complicated aspects of PlotNG, but I think we've simplified it so it's very, very usable. The first thing is this is truly an independent route validation. We use our own ARINC 424 data. We run our own calculations. And when we do the calculations, we are not using the built-in magnetic variation that comes with the 424 data. And I'll talk about that in just a moment. So the first thing that you see is that we have validations at both the initial fix as well as the midpoint of that route segment. We know that some operators are getting information from their providers that will give you a validation that they have based on one of those 2 points. So we're giving you both, so there's not going to be an issue of which one you need to choose. Notice that we give you the validation for the entire route. Our thinking is in for a nickel, in for a dime. So instead of just doing what it was classically called the Class 2 airspace validation for those route segments, in this case, it would be from about 57 north to about 61 north. We're giving you everything, and you don't have to use it, or you can use it, but just having the distances and the magnetic courses, it'll give you a little bit more confidence that everything that you have in your master document is indeed correct. We calculate and display the magnetic variation at each fix. Now, this calculation is based on the World Magnetic Model. It's the 2015 version 2 EPIC. This is kind of a technical part of the conversation, and this is one of the reasons why the data may not exactly agree with what's in your FMS. It turns out that it's a very complex way that member states provide magnetic variation in the ARINC 424 data, So our solution is don't use that data, but rather provide something truly independent and show you what you would actually see on your flight management system or on your PFD by way of what direction to fly. So we're giving you the magnetic variation, we're giving you the true course, and we're giving you the magnetic course. It's all there in black and white. We calculate and display the leg distance between those fixes as well, and those should match up very, very closely, if not identically, throughout your entire flight plan. And just to reiterate, we use the WMM 2015 magnetic model, and we base all of our calculations on the WGS 84 reference ellipsoid. So we're not doing spherical calculations, we're doing the same thing that you have in your GPS or in your FMS or whatever other navigation system we're using. This is effectively, but not always, the worldwide standard. And lastly, this is actually fully independent, and it is done in a way that is different from what you get from your providers. So this does satisfy the spirit of what's in 9170B. So let's talk about reroutes. There are two situations that can occur. And the first one is that you happen to be really lucky and your airplane is equipped with Wi-Fi. The second one is that your aircraft is not equipped with Wi-Fi. So in the first case, if you do have Wi-Fi and you do get a reroute once you start coasting out, it's entirely possible that it may just be a track or two that gets shifted, or you may have a major reroute if some weather system pops up that you weren't expecting. In this case, because you have Wi-Fi, it's also likely that you're going to get a new flight plan from your provider. When you get that in, send it to PlotNG. It'll process it very quickly. But we understand that Wi-Fi is expensive, and we also understand it's certainly not at broadband speed like you may have in your home. So we provide some options that you could put in on the subject line. You'll see on the left-hand side of your email, which tells PlotNG, look, we got a reroute. We're not interested in getting all of the really big PDFs that are very, very data intensive. So rather, please do the calculations for us, give us the content pack for ForeFlight, but don't send us the PDFs. It's duplicative, we don't need to see it, and it's too time consuming. The first option at PlotNG reroute simply gives you the trip kit and it will send the contingency PDFs, but if you want to eliminate them entirely, you can just say at PlotNG minus reroute. So that's the simplest way of getting a complete package back, and you don't have to type anything or do anything or move any points or potentially have any human factors problem when it may be late at night and you're tired. But if you happen to be one of those pilots flying an airplane that doesn't have Wi-Fi, we've got you covered on that too. So you'll notice that this is a route excerpt. This is the same one that we had before, and part of the route on the right-hand side overlaps a PBCS track layer. This is what the reroute would look like. So I'm literally going to just touch those fixes and drag them down to the coordinates that are given in my reroute message. Notice that the ETPs stay in the same location. Well, we don't know what those new locations are for the route because you didn't run it through PlotNG. So that's where that is. So now the question arises, well, how do I figure out where those ETPs would move onto the new reroute? It's very simple. We provide you with an additional layer called reroute, and we have done the calculation to give you a graphical solution which takes into account the winds aloft and what the location was of where the ETP is. And you'll notice that those extension lines, which are color-coded to match each of the ETPs, cross through that course. Where those two lines intersect, the extension line that we generate and the new course line, that's where the new ETP would be in that case. So this is a very simple solution, but make no mistake, it's only telling you the location of the ETP. It is not telling you what the expected fuel burn is. In that case, either use your FMS or contact your provider. That's the best way of getting the data. Here is a blow-up of a section of the route that has the reroute in it. You'll notice that you have 3 different groups of 3 ETPs. You can see the track layers. You can also see the extension lines that we generate. And you'll notice that at the top of that image and at the right side, we have 2 of the ETP airports. And just like you would do it in pencil and paper, you can eyeball it and see that the 3 extension lines actually go through at a perpendicular angle to the line that you would draw between those 2 alternate airports. This is a very precise calculation that we're doing. This is not an estimate. So if the data that comes from your flight plan is correct, then this will give you a very, very good starting point as to where the ETPs are located without having to lift a pencil or pick up a calculator. So let's put it all together. This is a shot of all of the major features of PlotNG. There are a bunch of other features which you can't see on here. We have the route, which is what you need to plot. You have the ETP points, which is what you need to plot. You have the tracks, which again you need to plot. You've got NAT contingency taken care of. And you'll notice that there are 1, 2, 3, 4 different alternate airports. The last airport is the destination, and that one has the black circle around it. It's a little hard to see. It's in the upper right-hand corner. So we have a situational awareness advantage using these large rings around the airports where you can see at a glance where everything is located, where you're going, and what you have to do. So here is a second example, and you'll notice now that there were 2 contingency buttons. The ETPs in the upper right-hand corner fall within the NAT, so they're going to have a yellow NAT contingency button, and if you touch that button, you'll get the NAT bulletin. But notice that the ETPs on the lower left do not have a NAT contingency, but rather have the contingency button. And when you tap that, you'll get the document that we have from James Albright's site. And PlotNG is smart enough to understand which rules you need to go by, and we're here to provide guidance to help that process. So let's talk about a feature of ForeFlight that a lot of pilots have not yet had the opportunity to play with or learn, and it's called custom content. And this is in the, if you hit the more in the lower right-hand corner of the screen, the 5th icon down on the left is called custom content. And this is what it looks like on the right-hand side if you load in a content pack from PlotNG. You'll notice that I've blown up a little area of the ETP KML. Now, each one of those lines has a different layer that you can view in ForeFlight. The left-hand side is the icon with the name prefixed by the recall number. The right-hand side says send it to the map. If I touch just the file name, you'll actually get a summary of all of the information that's in it, and it works for all of those layers, including the track layers. So in this case, I'm showing you an excerpt which shows you what the diversion airport information looks like that you can see very quickly at a glance. So there's many ways to get information out of ForeFlight. We hope that we've organized it in a way that proves to be useful. The green icons are the layers which contain the graphics and the interactive touch spots that you saw on the map layer. The top 3 are PDFs. So we have the contingency PDF, we have the NAT contingency PDF, and then of course, we have yet another copy of the route validation because we always want to keep that validation with the trip kit so you're fully documented. In ForeFlight, if you pull down the layer menu on the top left corner of the map screen, you'll notice on the right column at the bottom, that's where those layers appear. And they're exactly the same names. So by tapping those layers, you can turn on and off any one of the features at will. We have highlighted the 10-minute checks, we have the ETPs, and we also have the reroute, which you can see on the screen. ForeFlight has a brand new option which allows you to keep that menu up so that you can turn on and off multiple layers before returning to the screen. And you can find that in settings. It's a great tool. So we recommend a few things. Firstly, you can have multiple content packs loaded, which allows you to have multiple flights loaded. You may want to do that because you have a reroute, or you may want to compare several trips, but you're expected to manage it yourself. And on that, for that reason, ForeFlight provides you with a delete content pack option at the bottom where you can remove them at will. The best practice that we suggest is run your final trip kit within an hour of departure. That way you're guaranteed to get the latest track messages, and that's something that's always beneficial for every flight. Again, if you tap the icon, you get a display summary of the layer. You can immediately just hit send it to the map to put that layer on the screen anytime you want. So there's multiple ways of getting data displayed on your ForeFlight screen as well. So I have a small video demo here, which will show you what's involved in loading a route into PlotNG, and then we're going to turn the individual layers on and off. So this is the email that we received. I'm scrolling it up. You're going to tap the load route into ForeFlight. ForeFlight opens up. The route then gets loaded in, and I'm going to pinch zoom so you can see what the entire route looks like. Now I'm pulling up the layer options. I'm turning on the oceanic NARC chart. I'm going back to the email, scrolling down to the trip kit, and sharing that with ForeFlight. So it's 2 steps, and that's all you need to learn how to do to get the information to ForeFlight. Here are the layers. And I touch the send it to map for the ETPs. I'm now on the menu option, and as I touch the various options, you can see the various layers turning on and off. So you have total control of how you'd like to declutter your screen. So in this case, I have the ETPs and the reroute, as well as the 10-minute checks. And you can see on the lower right-hand portion of the screen, we have an ETP diversion airport down in Lajes. So let's talk about document management. Once your trip is finished, there are many different ways of skinning this cat, but PlotNG provides a solution to help companies or individual pilots that don't necessarily have established procedures that all the pilots are using in exactly the same way. You can put in the archive field an email address that would hopefully be different than the email address that you're using to communicate with PlotNG. So this email address that you would set up would be a new account for the purposes of archiving just your trips. And when you run a trip through PlotNG, what we'll do is we'll create a specially formatted email that contains the full trip kit plus a bunch of other data that will automatically be saved there without you having to do anything. So the email is formatted specifically to support full text search in your email client. Subject line contains the recall number. It's extremely easy for IT to configure, or you can even configure one yourself, for example, with a free Gmail account. And you can also send your screenshots to the same email address so that as you log those 10-minute G&E issues, you would be able to keep all of your documents together in one place, and they could be searched by date or recall number. So again, PlotNG does not get in the way. We're not telling you or dictating to you how you have to do it. We're just providing a solution that may help you along in the process. And as I said earlier, you can use any iOS shortcut to automate any of these processes to work in a way that benefits you. We actually provide 3 different iOS shortcuts to get started to demonstrate how to save screenshots, how to load content packs, how to do 10-minute checks, and you can download them off of your account screen in the settings page. And it should be a good model if you'd like to play with this feature to customize this for your flight department use. However, a lot of people use Dropbox or Google Drive, in which case you don't have to be bothered with any of this stuff. You can simply just copy your screenshots directly to those drives at the end of your flight, and it takes literally 2 or 3 seconds to do that. So here's another video demo, and this is a way that we're using one of the iOS shortcuts to package up your screenshots. So this is a shot from before where we did the 10-minute check. And from ForeFlight, I can select one of my screenshots. I'm choosing Email the Snappies. It's running the screenshot. It allows me to pick whatever screenshots I want. I then say done. It will resize those images, package it up into a single PDF, and then send it to whatever email address I've set up in the shortcut. The number of ways of handling this is limitless by your imagination, so you can do whatever makes the most sense for you. So this is a list of the providers that we currently support. We're adding a few more as we speak. This is the vast majority of all the big players in the field. And when we say that we support the provider, when you set your flight plan in, you don't need to tell us who your provider is. PlotNG is smart enough to figure out which provider produced that flight plan and how to read the data out of it. So when we add a provider, we're just simply teaching PlotNG how to read your flight plan. So where do we go from here? If you guys are interested in participating in the free beta preview, which will allow you to set up a flight department account, and you can add pilots to it and run your flight plans through and start using PlotNG now to see how it works, We certainly encourage you to do it, and you can sign up by going to fly.plotng.com. We definitely encourage you to download the user guide, which is on our website. It's more pictorial, kind of set up in a checklist format. Or if you just want to communicate, send me an email, don@plotng.com. We'll get back to you ASAP. If you have your cell phone cameras out and this is of interest to you, take a picture of the screen so that you can retain those URLs and email addresses. And now I'm going to turn the floor over to anybody who has any questions.
All right, Don, we've got a lot of questions here, and I'm going to go ahead and read some of them to you, and then you can go ahead and address that. Right now, the first question is, can I use JetView app together with the program?
So the answer to that is PlotNG at this time only works with ForeFlight. It does not work with any of the Jeppesen products or ARINC Direct products that are currently on the market.
Do you have to subscribe to ForeFlight to use PlotNG?
That's an excellent question, and the answer is yes. And while I do not work for ForeFlight and am not a representative of the company, what I will tell you is, based on the information on their website, they have various different plans that you can sign up for, from individual pilot plans to professional flight department plans. With the exception of the basic professional flight department plan, we work with all of the plans. So PlotNG can operate with the least expensive ForeFlight plan to give you all of this capability.
As you mentioned, there is zero pilot input as to how the lat long record electronically. Is it recording all the time, or is it using 10 minutes or the 2-minute method? I'm not sure.
Let me, I'm not sure exactly what's getting on the question, so let me sort of address that in a couple of different ways. When we read your flight plan, we're actually taking out all of that information that's in the flight plan at that time, and that's how we build the PlotNG layers to display the information that you're looking for. As far as the 10-minute checks are concerned, those are pre-calculated at the time that you load the trip kit. They do not move. There's nothing dynamic, if you will, inside of PlotNG that changes on the screen. The stuff that does change is a consequence of what ForeFlight's capability provides you with. And we were very, very careful to let ForeFlight do what it does best and let us do what we do best. And you can take advantage of any of those features any way that you like. I hope that answers the question.
Is there a beta that we can sign up for? And I think you addressed that in the end of the presentation.
Yes, so go to fly.plotng, plotng.com, and click on the register button at the top. There's a very short form to fill out, and it takes us only a couple hours to get to everybody who's trying to get into the system. You should get an email back from us, which gives you instructions about how to set up your account, and it's free for the time being. We expect to be launching the full product hopefully sometime in the next month. And at that time, there will be a fee for using the service.
Okay. What if we use a call sign?
Great. So PlotNG recognizes both the call sign and the registration number. And on that email that you receive, we will display both. You'll have the registration number and the call sign in parentheses, so you can confirm that you're really using the right airplane and really using the right call sign.
Okay. And there was a question about, will this be available afterwards? And we are recording it, and it will be available. And if you go to the 30 West IP website, there's a link for the webcast. If the 10-minute check is based on computerized flight plan speed, what if there's a speed change? How will the 10-minute check be done?
Okay, so the 10-minute checks are static. If there is a speed change and that speed change occurs because of a clearance from ATC, you won't have the new locations on the screen. But what I will say about that is you do have a tool within ForeFlight, which is the measuring tool, that allows you to put one end of the stick on your fix and the other end of the stick on the 10-minute check. and you can easily determine what the correct location is that you would be at. The 10-minute check is not literal as we read it. It's a very strongly recommended location. So if you're 11 minutes or 9 minutes and 55 seconds, just so long as you do it before a GNE can develop, that's the critical part of this thing. That said, if you had a gross speed difference and the 10-minute check was twice the distance away, you should use the ForeFlight tool to give you what the correct location is. So again, we're giving you the starting point, but ForeFlight provides additional tools to help you refine it if you need to.
All right, and I'm going to jump ahead because we've got a whole bunch of questions asking the same thing, and that's on pricing. So how about if you address that now, and then we'll continue with the other technical stuff so that can get out there.
Okay, so the pricing is an excellent question. Everybody asks us that. I will say at this point that we refined the model so that it is one subscription model is good for everybody. If you're a single pilot with a single airplane, it works just as good as if you're a flight department with 100 airplanes and 1,000 pilots. It makes no difference. That said, the actual cost of the application, it has not yet been finalized, and that will happen probably in the next week or two, but I can assure you it's going to be the eensy beensy tiniest fraction of what you're accustomed to paying for other services. It's not even going to be a blip.
All right. Can you discuss the legality, FAA and ICAO, to plotting electronically versus paper and manual plotting?
So that's a pretty large topic to talk about. And what I'll say is this: there already is guidance concerning electronic plotting that the FAA does publish. There's a little bit of guidance if you kind of read between the lines from ICAO. The idea is everybody basically needs to have the documentation, and the documentation isn't just a willy-nilly thing. It's what happens in the worst case scenario, which in my mind would be a SAFA check. And there are like 53 line items in the SAFA check, 2 or 3 which actually do address documentation requirements. So if you can demonstrate that you have the exact equivalent, and that's one of the design goals of PlotNG. We're not trying to give you a solution that's way outside the box that uses all sorts of advanced technology. We're giving you the exact paper equivalent of what you have been doing on paper. So it's a very easy transition to see that, yes, you have a chart. Yes, you drew your lines. Yes, you drew your ETPs. Yes, you have your tracks. It doesn't matter if it's electronically produced or if you did it by hand. When we finally worked through our first 135 operation approval, I think at that point we'll have a white paper which will then lay out exactly what's going on from a, and I use this in quotes, a legal basis. We are working with all the appropriate parties to get all of this stuff resolved in the best possible correct way without rewriting any regulations or any rules.
Yeah, and 9170 Bravo addresses using plotting electronically, and it suggests if you're a Part 91 operator that it would need to be consistent with the guidance on the electronic flight bag. So if you have an electronic flight bag that meets the criteria, I think that would be a better starting point. And obviously the final word on that's probably not in yet. The next question: in addition to having the Z time in the bottom menu for screenshots, adding the current coordinates option would be a great value. So there's a suggestion.
Yes, that's actually true. There has been some discussion concerning the, and again, I use the quotes, the legality for using a digital presentation of that information when you take the screenshot versus actually writing it on the chart itself. You cannot go wrong by annotating the chart in the way that I showed you in the slides. Using the other methods certainly takes a little bit of workload off of you and just makes it as simple as making a screenshot. But at the end of the day, without putting the X on the screen, you have not gone through the process of confirming with your official certified avionics source, that is your FMS, that the location is as plotted on the chart. So you definitely need to put that X there in some way, whether it be creating a user waypoint or putting an X on there just by drawing it.
Is your own nav data Type 2 LOA compliant?
It's actually better than that. It's Type 1 LOA compliant. We are getting it from a LOA 1 provider, and everything is fully certified, and it's an internationally recognized provider of that data. We're not fooling around with this.
In the case of an oceanic reroute, would this be acceptable as a new master working document?
So we are not producing the master document. The master document does not specifically tie into plotting insofar as what's required on the chart. You would have to produce your own new master document. At some point, we may revisit that as an additional option for a future version of PlotNG, but right now we're only concerned with the plotting aspect itself.
Well, you're referring to, I think, the fact that the master document is sometimes referred to as a computerized flight plan, and the annotations on the computerized flight plan would still need to be conducted in the traditional fashion.
That is correct.
And then if this were a reroute, and yeah, I can understand the question. If it's a reroute and you put that reroute together on that chart, and then later there was scrutiny of it, would that meet the, would that satisfy whoever does the scrutiny and the analysis later?
Okay, so that's an excellent question, and this gets into the legality part of it. And the way I'm going to answer that today is we believe that we have all of those bases completely covered. We are working now with the appropriate parties to confirm that information, and as soon as we have final confirmation and acceptance of our solution, then we'll make that knowledge available to the pilot base. But yes, we do believe that we've nailed this one.
And there's a response from one of the viewers, and he's suggesting that, of course, you should be able to enter the FMS position via the app. The manual X is prone to error and confirmation bias. So I'm not, we'll know more about that as things evolve. A question, how does ICAO deal with electronic versus paper plotting?
So this is my opinion now. I don't think that ICAO has in the same black and white dictum the way the FAA is providing information using 91-70B guidance. The short answer to this is that if you're an international operator, that is to say, you're based in a foreign country, there should be no issue with it. If you're a U.S. operator and you're going back and forth, again, there should be no issue with it. All of this stuff is brand new technology. We're one of the first companies out of the gate with this kind of a solution. And this is why, as I said a number of times already, that we're looking to get a 135 operation up and running, because once we do that, we will know that we have all of our ducks in a row and there should be no issue with member state acceptance of what we're doing.
And I think it would be safe to say, at least in my interpretation, that the FAA requirements for plotting are more stringent than ICAO, and are more constraining than ICAO. If let's see, I see your solution to the 10-minute plot is a manual notation. Is there any way to insert a lat long via ForeFlight rather than have a manual notation?
Yes, as I said earlier, you can create a user-defined waypoint very easily, and that would allow you to literally type in the exact information that you're reading from your FMS. So you have multiple ways of skinning the cat. Just like I said, for all the other features, we don't want to get in the way. We're just showing you simple things that you can do, but you can certainly add a user waypoint. It will show up on your screen at the location that you provided, and take a screenshot of that. You're done.
Okay. Does it support ForeFlight? Does it support ForeFlight flight plans, or do you have to have one of the other providers, i.e., AirRank or GDC?
So I cannot speak specifically to the ForeFlight flight plans themselves. That is to say, if you're using the international version, because I don't actually know what they're generating. What I would say to you is right now, PlotNG will only work with the list of providers that we have, which are the major providers, not ForeFlight. Doesn't mean that ForeFlight might not at some point provide all the information that is required in the flight plan, which would be, the header containing the aircraft, what your flight plan looks like, the ICAO portion of it, and the ETPs. If you've got a document and it's in a new format, we're teaching PlotNG how to read new flight plan formats all the time. We'll be happy to add that if ForeFlight provides that data. At this point, my understanding is that they do not provide all the data that would be required to generate the information that we generate for these plots.
Okay. And a response to the previous question from the questioner, will the user-defined waypoint that you just described in the previous question become part of the flight plan route?
So a user-defined fix is not part of the route unless if you insert it into the route. That is to say, I can display a whole bunch of different fixes on my map, which have nothing to do with the route, just by turning on the user waypoint layer, or I can insert them into the route as I wish. I would recommend that if you use the user waypoint option, do not insert it in the route, because you don't want the route line going up to it. You want to see graphically if there was a GNE, and you can zoom in on it and see if there's any difference. More to the point, it's not part of your clearance. So on that basis, I think it should also just be a separate fix. And again, you'll see it on the screen. You can tap on that waypoint and you can get and confirm the latitude and longitude that you entered.
Okay. Are you planning on partnering with Jepson in the future?
When they call us and decide that they want to acquire us, we'll definitely have a nice conversation with them.
Okay. All right. That's fair. Go over the reroute option where there is no internet and on the flight deck. So if there's
Okay.
no internet in the airplane, the reroute would be based on, and you don't have the screen, I realize that, but perhaps you can verbalize it.
Sure. So in the case that you don't have Wi-Fi on the airplane, you will probably get some kind of a data link reroute, or you may have voice communications to get what the reroute is. And once you get that information, you will more than likely go to ForeFlight and either using your finger to drag route or segments of the route to new locations based on the reroute, if it's just simply moving over a couple of tracks, or you may remove part of your flight plan and just update it with that new route segment that's part of your reroute. But once you do it, you'll notice that the new route, the magenta line, does not necessarily co-locate with the ETPs, because the ETPs don't move, just the route moved. And in that case, you would then go to the layer options, select the reroute layer, and we would show you the graphical solution as to where the ETPs would translate, and where that translation line intersects your new route, that's where the ETPs would be located. So it's a visual graphical solution, just like you would have done it with pencil and paper, except you don't need a pencil and paper.
Very good. If we encounter a contingency, can PlotNG capture that? And I'm not positive I can visualize that. If you execute a contingency and you had on screen, I'm not even going to try. Don, if we encounter a contingency, can PlotNG capture that?
I'm not entirely sure what capturing it means, but I'll just reiterate that we do provide buttons on the screen as in the route area, so that if you do encounter a contingency and you need to review the procedure, tapping that icon will bring up the document immediately, so you don't have to fumble through a whole bunch of different pages. As far as capturing it, I'm not entirely sure what the user is asking there.
Okay. Perhaps you can rephrase that. We're almost done with the questions. We've got 4 more right now. We may get another. If PlotNG is using a remote GPS for the location, does the aircraft icon show up on the screen?
Yes. And I'll also add that a lot of operators use Stratus devices or the dual GPS puck. I also know that a lot of pilots don't like putting those things on the glare shield for various reasons. If you happen to have Wi-Fi in your airplane and you're a Gojo user, then I can tell you that a ForeFlight does receive GPS location from Gojo, so you can operate without the puck. But the bottom line is this: if you have GPS information, whether you have the built-in GPS in your iPad, which doesn't always work without some type of an augmented device, or you have an augmented device, or you've got Gojo, you will see the airplane or own ship on the display, and your situational awareness goes up by orders of magnitude.
Okay. All right, and will it work with a bad ELF? There was a question earlier that I apparently didn't capture. Will it work with a bad ELF?
So the answer to that is we do not get involved in the process of whether or not ForeFlight will operate in any given environment. So if you want to use a bad ELF GPS, have at it. And if your GPS can receive the signal based on the location where the iPad is in the cockpit, and you don't have any interference in receiving that signal, there's absolutely no reason why it won't work. If you're using it now, it will continue to work brilliantly in the future.
Okay. Is there FAA approval, and is the chart information available electronically? For example, frequencies, weather diversions, accuracy check, things. And I think I think you covered that, didn't you?
Yes. Do you have anything else?
So you want to recap? You're working on FAA approval?
We are working, actually, we're not working on FAA approval, not approving anything, but what we are working on is working with the FAA to smooth the way for our first 135 approval. And as soon as we have that worked out, then we're going to provide more documentation of what we did, how we did it, and how you, as a 135 or a 121 operator, can quickly piggyback off of that to get PlotNG to be approved in your operation. It's a fairly quick process. It's just really a matter of making sure that we have all our I's dotted and our T's crossed.
Hey, Mitch, this is Dennis.
Yes.
Can I provide a couple comments?
Oh, please, please do.
Yeah, the presentation was very impressive. I must say, it's very, even though loading the flight plan is pretty easy, there's a lot of mechanics involved and knowledge that's going to be necessary for the individual to be able to function even as a simple piece of paper. It's not going to be insurmountable, but it's going to take a little bit of time, and there's going to have to be quite a bit of documentation in the IOM or some feature where it's available to the crew if they have any questions. I don't look for that to be a problem, but you know, I have been on a couple of oceanic validations where there was paper and iPad. And the thing you have to be careful with, and this is for anybody, some people love gadgets, some people like paper. I like both of them, actually. But in one instance, and maybe more than one, somebody's paying only attention to the electronic portion of it and not paying attention to independently verify the paper plot. And some of the plotting was in error when I discovered it, and it made for a pretty uncomfortable situation. The other thing, excuse me, in generalities now, I'm not sure who you're working with the FAA on the 135. That's I'd be interested in that. But the area in which you have to concentrate is in the A061, the EFB. In the EFB AC, it talks about adding different features to the the iPads and all the other things. One of them is sufficient training and not to be conflictions, and doesn't cause conflictions. For instance, the paper and the electronic and everything. I don't, what you would probably be wanting to do is to have eventually one or the other. it's still good to have two, but you could have one as the master again and all the other things. And, you know, I would strongly suggest that Don, to get with, you know, our management. His name is Eric Parker. I'm not sure if you've talked to him yet. So that if you want this thing to move in a reasonable amount of time, these are projects that we have to take on, and it probably will take some time to go through it. You had I mean, you know every button and every switch. And that to me was impressive, because I've been through other ones where they didn't come off as smooth as this. But there was a lot of information there. So my hat's off to you anyway.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. I appreciate that. I didn't want to drag you in, but I'm glad that you spoke up. We've just got two more questions. It's we have. I guess this is more of a comment. I'd rather see you join forces with ForeFlight. You complement each other. So thank you for the comment. And then finally, is there a level of ForeFlight subscription required? Basic, Pro Plus, or Performance that's required for you to have access to all of these layers?
So as I said earlier, there is only one level of ForeFlight subscription, which is in the Performance Plus arena, that does not allow you to view content pack layers. You can use a basic ForeFlight subscription and you'll get all the features of PlotNG uninterrupted. So you have a lot of flexibility as to whether or not you'd like to go with something less expensive or something more expensive. And there are reasons why you may want to choose one or the other.
Okay, let me rephrase that. It will work with all of the subscriptions, correct?
There's one subscription. So I think it's 5 levels of subscription that they have. 3 are on the individual non-performance level, and then there's 2 that are on the performance. So it's Performance and Performance Pro, I think. My understanding is that the lower performance level one does not permit the use of content packs. Only the top tier performance level allows you to use content packs. All of the individual non-performance service programs or subscriptions that ForeFlight has, you can use ForeFlight in. I'm sorry, you could use PlotNG in. So it's of the 5, there's only one that PlotNG will not properly work with. And I know it's a little confusing, but what you're looking for is go into ForeFlight's website, take a look at their comparison between the 5 different options, and look specifically to make sure that you can load content packs. If you can, you're good to go.
And we have finally somebody just added one. I just signed up for PlotNG, then tried to log on. However, it didn't give me the opportunity to set a password.
It's very possible that you may have received the email back from PlotNG, which allows you to do that email confirmation. And if you didn't do that, that would be the reason that you would get that kind of feedback. But what I would suggest is my email address is don@plotng.com. Please shoot me an email after this webinar, and I'll be happy to take up the matter with you individually, whoever you are.
Okay. Let me just thank you, Don, for putting on the presentation. And we're not endorsing this. Dennis isn't endorsing this. We do appreciate your very thorough look at it, because really we're all trying to learn in this environment. And I think you really helped us out today. We're going to do this again in December, and you can go to the website and register, or we will send out an invitation the week before, as we traditionally do. I want to remind you that this is recorded and that it will be available for review later from a link in our website. So thank everybody for all the excellent questions, and we appreciate your participation. And if there's no further comments, we'll go ahead and close up. All right, thank you all.